Ready, Set, Podcast! So if you're bartending, you're bussing tables, I'd really make sure you understand how underpaid. Oh, but Joe, it's gonna go back to the way it used to be, won't it? But Joe, they promptly removed those once they became profitable again. Those wages aren't coming back. This is the Ready, Set Podcast. And here's your host, me, Joe Persinger. Hey, what's going on, everyone? All right, let's get to the staff report.
We're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day.
The staff reports.
So we finished the first part of the podcast, ending on automation, and we're going to get to that in just 1 second here. But I just wanted to kind of talk about how we're seeing automation kind of already in today's restaurant world. I mean, you have Red Robin, Darden restaurants, even Chili's have these electronic devices on their tables, and I'm sure you've noticed they're called Zios, or what I used to call the thing that's going to take my job. And this is really the first step in the automation process, and really it should be the last step. I mean, this whole device can do a server's job minus the food running. But Joe, most of these restaurants already have those. Automation's not going to happen. Well, I've already seen bars that have replaced the bartenders with automatic draft pours. That's happening, folks. I mean, these bars are basically set up where you get a card, so they're already carding you, so you don't need a human person to card you if you already have that person at the door. And basically these machines just will pour to the ounce. And trust me, if you're a bartender, you know there's a lot of waste, or if you're managing a bar, if anything. So we're all going to blink, and the service staff within the industry won't even be human. Automated? But Joe, some people will always want that human interaction. Yes. And that's why restaurants will have to opt to have a service staff that will most likely be fine dining establishments. So service will become a premium, which has its benefits, its pros, if you will, and its cons. So we're going to play a quick little game here called Pros and Cons, if you haven't guessed. So first up, Pro. This will weed out the bad servers. This is correct. If anyone's working in a restaurant, you definitely know there are people that like to show up, wait on their tables, and get the hell out of town. So this process will probably weed most of those people out. And if you're one of those people, I would be very scared right now. Con. Competition for these lucrative jobs will increase. Oh yeah, they will. I mean, this happened kind of a few years ago. Well, I'd say probably a few years after the economy collapsed, kind of like we were talking about last week. But this is, I'd say, more 2011, 2012. I started noticing there was a lot more college-educated servers. And it was very hard to compete for jobs, especially at really nice restaurants, when people are coming in with a bachelor's degrees in whatever and saying, oh, yeah, I can work. And as you caught at the end of the last podcast, we talked about a little bit of credentialism. And this kind of is where it affects some people that don't have these credentials. These people can walk in and say, hey, I got this work ethic on a piece of paper. I'll take that service job. And now the high school diploma guy who has no factory job to go to has got to go somewhere else. I mean, again, not the People's Republic of China. There's probably another restaurant, go capitalism. But the point is, the competition for these jobs is going to increase, especially if you shorten, or if the market decreases the amount of jobs available. It's classic supply and demand here. So sure, the competition will increase. Pro. I will make more money. Yeah, you probably will. I mean, again, we got talking about higher check averages earlier. I can't imagine this is a harder one, because there could be a market for this where the pricing could be right, or just where it finds a sweet spot. But I mean, market shift in that restaurant industry is so volatile; it could only be for so long. Anyway, I think the money will be on the higher side of the spectrum. Yeah, I remember going to Capitol Grill once, and I think the lady had an iPad. It's pretty fancy. And that was a few years ago. So I can only imagine where it's going to go from there. And it's just amazing how much technology is just integrating into the restaurant industry. I just wonder if it's even possible to even keep humans involved in the process. But I guess if people want human interaction, they'll be there. Con. You'll be working your ass off, and you'll be paid a slave wage. Oh yeah, most likely. I mean, the labor for serving I can't see increasing because, again, I thoroughly believe this. If the health department didn't exist and a lot of these companies could train chimps to serve tables, that's what they would do. And then, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But that's my personal belief. So, yeah, be prepared to make that $5 an hour and probably have a lot of responsibility. That really shouldn't be yours because why pay a busser if the server's going to do it? Especially if they're going to give you a 3-table section and you don't have anything to do. A good server with a 3-table section will have plenty of time. So I think another thing here that's really going to be another shift, in my opinion, would be the leverage would shift even further to the restaurant industry's favor. If a pool of candidates is mostly college educated, like I was saying earlier, versus a pool that's high school educated, unless you have a backdoor into that job, like someone that works there. I've gotten a server job that way. The interview was a formality. The market just hip-checked these people with the high school diplomas right out. The breakdown of how the restaurant market reacted in 2010 was by hiring people with bachelor's degrees. And this is what I was alluding to earlier. It's already a dime a dozen job, and this would probably make everyone a lot more replaceable. So in other words, if you have a small market of people and there's a larger group of people trying to get into said market, you can just be like, you're late 3 times, you're out. I'm going to bring in the next guy. Hollywood kind of works on this premise. You have 2,000 people vying for one acting job. Acting's honestly subjective. One person's acting ability or their acting ability will differ from someone else's. And this is very true in serving. So again, you become way more replaceable because there's a lot more people basically waiting to take your job. And what happens here is the bully culture that permeates between management and its hourly employees will still be there. Now, there are some restaurants out there where you have a great general manager or great regional director up and down. I'll be honest with you, that's very few and far between, but I'm sure they do exist. But for the most part, that's not the case. And we're talking bully culture. And that's why I stress this is completely hinged on who is setting the pace when it comes to the culture in that restaurant. So why do these restaurants have to deal with toxic cultures? And we've kind of already established here that the whole idea of the restaurant industry is toxic in itself. Especially in the track that it's going. We have right now, it's semi-automated, okay? So in a way, robots are already kind of taking part of your job. If it's so toxic from the get-go, what makes us think it's not going to be toxic moving forward? So why do restaurants have to deal with these toxic cultures? And honestly, it starts at the top. And if you really think about this, this is also true for the cleanliness of said establishment, any restaurant. And this is why attitudes at the top are very important. You can't put people with shit attitudes in leadership positions because there's an old phrase out there, shit rolls downhill. And it's almost a universal phrase. It could be because you're mad at someone. It could be because you're a happy person. If you're happy and your interaction, you get where I'm going with this, so on and so forth. So if your operations manager is a slob, control freak, who happens to also be a slob, you're going to see that echoed all the way to the bottom. Now, let's break down some of the reasons that we find toxic cultures in the restaurant industry. And I don't mean in the hiring process and knowing that your job's basically going to be automated in about 10, 15 years. I'm talking about once you get there, being in the restaurant. So here's the first one, is that they underpay their staff. And again, we established that last week with bussers getting their wages cut, bartenders getting their wages cut, servers basically having to share more of the tip pool now because restaurants are too cheap to actually pay their staff a living wage. Then you have managers that like to play favorites, like to always say that if you're at a restaurant and your server just happens to have that nice little trainer pin or trainer under their name on their name tag, that's probably a favorite. If you go in on a Friday night to a busy restaurant that you know is doing 30 grand that night, anyone working that night that's closing, there's a favorite. And they're probably a trainer. So you can see how this goes hand in hand. Here's another one this just kills me. There's a job I had that I kind of walked away from, a little involuntarily, if you will, because this restaurant went from, not enforcing a tip out to enforcing a tip out. And, one of the reasons I liked the non-enforced tip out was, one, I don't really like a lot of government oversight or just oversight in general, but it kind of kept those, the bartenders, the expos, and the bussers, it kind of kept them in check. They knew, hey, if I want to make my money tonight, I got to work. I got to show these separate 20 entities within this restaurant that I'm here for them. And again, this is really not hard to do when you're one of 4 bussers. And this works true for the bartenders. Now, the bartenders is a little bit different, especially at this restaurant. Because, and again, most restaurants on a Friday, Saturday night, on a small bar, you only have 1 bartender to deal with, maybe 2. This was a pretty big place. So they had at least 4 or 5 bartenders. Now, they all weren't tending bar. Maybe some of them would pour beer to help out. But for the most part, you had 1 person on the well, 4 bartenders pouring beer for guests or for each other, but essentially just working within the bar. Not 5 people making drinks for all the servers and people sitting. It just didn't work that way. It was 1 person on the well. And the expos at this restaurant, too, same thing. We had to tip them out as well because, the restaurant doesn't want to pay the food runners a livable wage. They just make us do that. So what we would see here is once they switched over to the enforced tip out, it was just like everyone just started mailing it in. Hey, just run your food. You fucking run my food. So I'm fucking paying you for, basically. Now, I know that is not a good attitude, but we're talking frustration in a situation where people used to work, and then all of a sudden they don't want to work. But the servers, so I say everyone's got a guaranteed wage here except the servers. And again, it just permeates toxic culture. Especially when you have management that can't even articulate an answer. I think I asked them once. I got a $10 tip on a $100 table, and once we calculated the tip out on that just one table, it was like almost $8. So I made $2. I basically paid for those people to eat. It's insane. And their argument was, well, when you get over tipped over 20%, you don't have to tip that out. What? Hold on. If you're not 100% involved in the tip-out process, in other words, you're using a third party to pay me, you don't have any say in how that third party pays me. If you want to maybe supplement the tips I don't get, then maybe we can talk. But that's not the case here. So it's just bullshit. And it's just overall part of the toxic culture in a restaurant. I can't believe I've rambled on for that long about that one. So here's the other one I got is, this one used to drive me nuts, and I'm sure it drives anyone nuts that's done time in a restaurant, but no out time is ever given. I screwed that up. No out time is ever given, so your hours are whatever the restaurant wants it to be. And honestly, I can probably keep going here. I'm not going to ramble on that much about this one. But this is so maddening. They say, hey, come on at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever it is. You kind of get an idea based on the ebb and flows of the restaurant, when you're going to get out of there, but you don't know. And again, every market is different. You go out, where I serve in like the Chicago suburbs or the Phoenix suburbs, not much is going on out there past 10 o'clock. But then, you're in a tourist city, insert whatever tourist city here, and depending on where you are in that part of the city, things could be hopping till 4 in the morning. That's kind of an exaggeration, but it feels that way. And again, every place is different. But the point is, at a certain point in someone's life, they want to know when they're going to go home. Not, hey, we just got to see what's going to happen in a few hours. If I want to be home at 8, I want to be home at 8. Again, not the People's Republic of China. You can find a job outside of the service industry. But I just feel that this narrative of, hey, you're just here until the restaurant says you can go home, it's just a load of crap. Usually what happens is the managers take advantage of that leeway that they're given. So what I used to see was there was a joke at one restaurant I worked at where, hey, if you wanted to get busy, cut the floor. Really what they're saying is, hey, if us managers want to end up running food and pouring beer and supporting the staff, cut the floor. So what would happen? They wouldn't cut the floor. Now that's good for them because, hey, they can just kind of sit back and just let the ship sail down the coast without really having to touch the steering wheel or move the rudder. But if they want to get ballsy because the labor's a little high that day, cut the floor a little much, now all of a sudden they're working. Well, that's not good for them. They don't get paid. They get paid the same if it's slow or busy, especially if they're on salary. Then they get paid no matter what happens. So what happens there, again, of feeding into toxic culture, you get some of these guys, they won't cut the floor. I had a situation where I worked for a company, Carrabba's, where the manager literally would not cut the floor, and she would not cut the floor out of spite. She would cut around you to spite you. It's insane. And then she could not figure out why I wouldn't want to work for her on a Saturday night. Gah! Just kidding. Not getting fired up. Now, this is kind of where I like to build this metaphor. Now, you can tie a bow around a piece of shit, but in the end, it's still a piece of shit. You can take a piece of poop, and you can roll it in glitter and stare at it as how it shines in the light. But in the end, underneath all that glitter, you're still looking at a piece of shit. This is also a metaphor for how I feel about Cardi B, but I digress here. So this poop glitter metaphor is the restaurant industry, but a sign of a good management team. Whoa, what? What are you talking about, Joe? Most restaurants, management teams won't even tie a bow around a piece of shit. They'll just point to it, say, hey, do you see that bow? Look, it's nice and pretty. It's shining in the light. You're like, what the fuck? I don't even see anything. And they just hope you're dumb enough. Basically, they're going to gaslight you. They're going to be like, no, it's right there. Don't you see it? It's right there. It's right in front of you. I don't see shit. Literally, I see shit. I just don't see shit. No, it's there. It's there. You want this guy to schedule you, give you Friday night. So you're not going to argue with him about the fact that there isn't a bow around a piece of shit. You're just going to be like, oh, yeah, I guess I see it. So some will tie a bow. As we established, let's start it this way. So some won't tie a bow, tell you it's there. And then you'll have some people that will tie a bow. But how pretty is it? But then you get a GM that goes in there, gets on his gloves, gets that bowl of glitter, takes that piece of poop, dumps it in that bowl, and he makes sure there's not a piece of poop visible to light. He wants this thing to be covered in glitter and sparkle in the light, that you'll never look away. But again, it's still a piece of poop. It stinks. No one wants to be there. They don't want to stand around it. But all this glitter, all this sugar, if you will, at least distracts you from the fact that you're in one of the shittiest jobs out there that's only going to get automated in the next 10 years or so. Gah! Now I'm getting fired up. You're going to have automation. I'm going to have to go to Chili's and order my avocado egg rolls or whatever the hell they're called through a computer. And am I still going to have to tip that thing? I can go on about how Democrats are probably going to add some tax to those things and then use that to finance this Green Deal, but we're not going there. I digress. So basically, you're treated like an independent contractor, but you represent the company. So sell, sell, sell. But not everyone likes to be told the truth bluntly. That's what I've learned. I used to think, oh yeah, I'll be that server that tells you how it is, because everyone they want to know what's going on. So I was serving at a beer and brew place, and I think I had a gentleman ask me, what do you think about this IPA? I don't really like IPAs. So I told him the truth. Not that I didn't like it, but that it was meh. So he just looks at me, stone-faced. younger guy, I believe. And he's like, way to sell the beer, pal. You know, I got to say he had a point. I was a little annoyed with him, but he did have a point. I'm a salesman. That's what I was there to do. And I wasn't doing that. I just found it odd that he asked me, not getting the response that he wanted, and then scoffed at me for it. Just a little weird. Then there's another time I was working a busy lunch, and we were coming towards the 4 o'clock hour, 4:15-ish, and this PM shift was coming on. And, of course, I'm getting sat at a table right in this, like, gray zone. So I wasn't happy. I learned a little trick where if you kind of tell the managers, hey, I don't feel comfortable taking this table, they'll kind of, you know, you're kind of absolved if anything goes wrong. Because, you know, let's say there was a complaint for whatever reason. You'd be like, hey, I said I didn't want to take the table, and you made me take the table. So it's really hard for them to hold you. I mean, what goes wrong, that's a whole other thing. But as far as being put in that position, that wasn't your fault. So I tried that. Didn't work. So I walk up to the table, you know, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. They basically asked me, they must have sensed something was up because one of them, I think, so it was a 6-top. There were 6 people there. The person on my right side, just right there, I mean, closest to me, asked, hey, man, is everything all right? And basically I just told them, oh, yeah, I mean, I was honest. I said, hey, I'm done at 4 o'clock. We're waiting for the pre-shift to end, and I got sat at this table, and I just didn't want to have to take it because I want to go home. Again, I don't really see anything wrong with that. I was being honest. I wasn't being cruel or anything. I just was, again, honesty is the best policy. So I think I was like maybe halfway through that explanation when the guy just got up and dipped. Didn't really think anything of it until I was pouring their drinks for them, and I get a tap on my shoulder. Hey, Joe, which was the manager, can I talk to you really quick? Sure. So what's going on with table, what was it, 55? I don't know. They said you didn't want to take the table. God damn it. God. The guy got up, went right to the manager after asking me, hey, what's wrong? And basically ratted me out. So in that moment, I was convinced nobody wants to hear the truth. Nobody is in the truth business. And if they are, there's something going on. Nobody wants to be told the truth. That was the hard lesson there. And I think that's kind of true here. Just, so you can kind of bring it all together. Nobody wants to be told your job's going to be automated in 10, 20 years. Maybe less. It's probably happening right now. And at the same time, you're working a shitty job and you're being taken advantage of. So, take that to the bank. I've got a few stories here I wanted to share, but I feel like I've been moaning on about serving about 22 minutes. So I think what we're going to do is maybe save that for another time. We got a few stories, just serving stories. And you know what? Let's do this. If you have any serving stories that you want to share with us, why don't you send us a tweet at Set.Podcast. I believe it's Set, PODCST, and that's at Twitter. Or if you'd like to send us an email, that'll be ReadySetPodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's get to the awards this week. We're going to do Stoner of the Week and Pants on Fire. Hit me, Klaus.
Bring him to the pants.
All right, so these two morons actually get 2 awards per the Stoner of the Week and Pants on Fire award. It's going to be Reed Henry, 18, and Jeremy Galladora, 17, called the police after they said they were robbed and assaulted after attempting to sell an item online for babies. When the story they weaved out of thin air didn't match up, they admitted it was marijuana and were arrested for filing a fake police report. Idiots. All right, well, that's going to be the podcast for the week. Don't forget to check us out on SoundCloud, and definitely don't forget to check us out on YouTube at Ready, Set, Podcast. Thanks for checking in. We'll see you next week, you fucks. Thanks for listening to the Ready, Set, Podcast. Check us out next week, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and look for us on our YouTube channel, Ready, Set, Podcast.